Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a Diablo and Overwatch news wrap-up video where we go over and give our thoughts on the happenings of the week. This week, we'll begin with a story that relates to both Overwatch and Diablo and every Blizzard game. Now, there was a Hearthstone patch this week, and data miners dug into the code and found some strings that suggest that an appear offline mode may be coming to Battle.net in the near future. These three strings here were pointed out, and two of them clearly mention being set to appear offline. Now, this is a feature that we, the community, have been requesting of Blizzard for a very long time. By appear offline, we mean being able to play the game while not appearing online to those in our friends list. You know, sometimes you're tired and you just don't feel like socializing. Or maybe you're just trying to avoid that one friend that always wants to hop in a game with you, but you don't really like playing with them, but you can't tell them that and break their little heart. So you're forced to either play with them or learn the times of the day that they're not online so that you can play at that time. All because your parents never taught you how to say no to people. You know, or maybe you just don't want your boss to know you play Hearthstone at work. Now, I remember wanting this appear offline feature ever since the launch of Battle.net 2.0 back in 2010 with StarCraft 2. This was the first game to use Blizzard's revamped platform, which was rebranded in March of 2017 to the Blizzard app. And we had some pretty strong thoughts on that, which we covered in a previous video. You can check that out. And while Appear Offline was a popularly requested feature ever since 2010, it was only in September 2012, months after the release of Diablo 3, that we got official word from Blizzard on the topic. Blizzard's statement read, "In the coming months, we're planning an update to Battle.net that will give you more control over your online presence when playing Blizzard games. Soon, World of Warcraft, StarCraft 2, and Diablo 3 players will be able to select Appear Offline as one of their Battle.net social status options. The Appear Offline status option will be added to these various games separately in future updates for each game. For Diablo 3, we expect to add the feature in a patch after 1.0.5. And to this day, we've still been waiting." Now, we didn't really hear again from Blizzard on the topic until Overwatch released. Game director Jeff Kaplan, shortly after the release of Overwatch, expressed that he would like to add an Appear Offline function, but that it was really complicated to do so and required coordination across all Blizzard games. In October 2016, Jeff Kaplan brought us a bit of promising news. Quote, "We would like to add an Appear Offline option to Overwatch. We are in the process of coordinating this with Battle.net and the other game teams. Skipping ahead, I know there has been discussion around this feature for a long time, and things have definitely not moved at a rate which is acceptable. I can assure you we care about the feature and want to figure out how to make it happen." Well, it seems after nearly a decade of waiting, all it took was for Jeff Kaplan to get on the job to get her done. Now, there's no promise that Appear Offline will actually be implemented. But this week's news is the first concrete proof that Blizzard has been actively working on it. Some people thought Blizzard would never actually implement Appear Offline because, I mean, think about it. What does Blizzard stand to gain from having a bunch of their players not appear online? A game seems healthier when you log in and see a bunch of your friends online. Adding an Appear Offline option seems to be something that's beneficial to the player, but not to the company, to the corporation. So it's no surprise to me that this has not been a priority for Blizzard. But hopefully we are close to this actually happening. Hopefully it's not just a failed experiment in the code. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes we data mine things that are just leftover relics of attempts at making something happen. Fingers crossed that we're going to get that Appear Offline option, and we're going to get it soon. Not soon TM. Okay, now if you're just here for the Overwatch news, then you can skip ahead in this video to the time indicated up above. Because now we're going to dive into Diablo 3. And boy, do we have a lot to discuss here. The exploit. So in last week's video, we spoke about an exploit, an unintended interaction between the Necromancer and the Demon Hunter that allowed players to reach previously unattainable Greater Rift levels. And this turned into quite a heated debate in our comments section, which I honestly was not expecting. A lot of you folks feel that this wasn't an exploit and no punishment should be due. Now, during the weekend, Blizzard did issue a statement clarifying that they consider this an exploit and they asked players to refrain from using it. But in a bit, we'll discuss more what an exploit is, because I feel there will still be some disagreement as to whether or not this was an exploit. But the situation really did become quite bad, especially over the weekend. It got to a point where even some big streamer was streaming the exploit. They were doing it knowingly. When people were pointing out Blizzard's post, they basically laughed or they played ignorant. And it caused a lot of friction amongst the community, amongst clans. You'd have people who were okay with the exploit and others who were adamantly opposed to it, and then you have clan leaders that are forced to make a decision, clan officers that have to enforce rules, and it's like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to ban half of my clan? It was just something that really tore the community apart. As you can even have seen from the comment section on the video, it seemed a lot of people were firmly in one camp or the other. The hotfix finally went live this week. After delay after delay after delay, it finally went live, patching out this exploit, and punishment was given out. Now, the punishment was any players who had their gems leveled up to a point that would have been previously unattainable, well, their gems were reset to the maximum previous attained level. That's around 132 level gems. So in other words, the absolute most dedicated, hardcore, best players have level 132 gems, so anyone that had gems of above that level, they got bumped down to 132. We'll talk a little bit more about the punishment in a bit. Now, on Friday of this week, community manager Tivolier issued a statement regarding the exploit, and some highlights from this were that in approaching the situation, Blizzard wanted to ensure that no legitimate players would be punished. Beyond the gem rollbacks, if you want to call it, Blizzard states that they want to punish the worst offenders by issuing temporary suspensions over the upcoming bonus XP weekend. For those who aren't aware, we're currently in a bonus XP weekend. Tivolier went on to say this may seem lenient, and that brings us to a philosophy we're working on, improving our communication. While the effect of this particular combination was unintended, nothing in the game explicitly indicated that was the case. It is our responsibility to clarify intent, and we simply weren't quick enough with our communications. One more point we want to emphasize, we are not okay with exploits. We made mistakes in our communication and the speed of our actions, and for that, the community has our utmost apologies. Our intent is to continue to fix exploits and communicate clarity behind them as quickly as we can in the future. Now, I know a lot of people are disappointed in Blizzard's stance and the severity or lack thereof of their coming down on the exploiters, but I think overall the spirit of this message is good. The team is telling us that they're trying to improve their communications. That's a good thing. The team is admitting that they didn't react fast enough. That's good. They're recognizing an issue that happened. They're apologizing. I believe we're seeing intent here to be better next time. I personally don't feel that the punishment is much of a punishment at all. And I don't necessarily agree that the actions taken by Blizzard here were the best actions, but I can say that this message, at least, their words, are promising. I just feel that Blizzard's being a little bit too much of the pushover parent that can't really give a real punishment to their kids. What's that? You stole from Nana's purse? Well, no dessert for you tonight. The community's disappointment in the lack of harshness was exacerbated by rumors that started about the exploit rollback being rolled back. So in other words, you use the exploit to get your gem to 140, then Blizzard punished you by bringing it down to 132, so you just account rollback to bring it back up to 140. This was what the rumor was. Now, there was no actual proof of this, but a lot of people were spreading this story, until eventually Tivolier had to step in and issue a message saying, just wanted to jump in to say we've heard reports of people attempting to roll back their rollback, we've looked into it and seen no cases where people are actually trying to do so, but they are keeping a close eye on it. Now, what I like about this message is more so that it suggests that if anyone does attempt to do this, they're gonna do something about it. They won't let it slide. If Blizzard did not intend to stop this, they wouldn't have issued a statement at all. Okay, so that's all the facts of what happened with the exploit over this week. It was quite a week. And now let's talk about this. As I said before, quite a few of you disagreed with the stance I took in my previous video. And that's great. And why it's great is that most of you who disagreed did so in a way that opened up discussion. It's okay for people to disagree on important issues, as long as they can have a constructive and civil discussion. And I respect and appreciate the civility of your comments. And even after we discuss this more, if we still disagree, that's still okay. People are allowed to disagree on things and still get along. I wouldn't want anyone to ever blindly accept what I say, because when we're challenged with different perspectives, that gives us an opportunity to grow. So let's dive into this. Let's start with what is an exploit, because it seems just the very definition of the word is contentious. To me, it's pretty straightforward. As Wikipedia puts it, exploit means to take advantage of something, a person, a situation, etc., for one's own end, especially unethically or unjustifiably. Technically, just playing a game optimally could be considered taking advantage of a game's mechanics to find the most powerful combinations or tactics. But the negative connotation in the definition is important. There's nothing inherently unethical about playing optimally. And this is why a lot of you are arguing that this wasn't an exploit. It was just finding a very powerful combination. A lot of you feel that you can only exploit a bug. If it's not a bug in the game, it's not an exploit. I personally disagree with that and agree with Wikipedia's definition of a video game exploit. In video games, an exploit is the use of a bug or glitches, game system, rates, hitboxes or speed, etc. by a player to their advantage in a manner not intended by the game's designers. This is where things get tricky. How do we know the intent of the designers? A lot of you guys rebut to this, well, then everything's an exploit. Every time we find a new powerful combination, the devs didn't think of it. So there's many builds out there that are exploits. I mean, the devs have basically admitted that it's the community that finds the most powerful combinations, not them. That time and again, we surprise them by finding things that they didn't think of. But that's the key. In a game like Diablo, the developer's intention is that we find combinations that they didn't think of. Their intention is for us to find what they didn't intend. But then nothing is an exploit, right? Well, not necessarily. The developers intend for skills to behave the way they should. If a skill says it does something, then the intent is that it does that thing. That thing may be something that is powerful when combined with another skill that does the thing it's intended to do, and in that case, even if the devs did not think of that combination, it's not an exploit. It's two things doing what they were intended to be doing, interacting in a powerful way. If that interaction is too powerful, it may need to be nerfed, but it's not an exploit. But in the case of this exploit, which I still believe was an exploit, one of those skills is not doing what it's intended to be doing. The skill description of the Frailty Curse reads, a crippling curse that kills enemies with less than 15% health. It does not say a crippling curse that deals a completely absurd amount of damage to enemies with less than 15% health. So the intent of the skill is clear, but what players realized was, hey, this skill doesn't actually do what it says it does. Let me take advantage of that fact by combining it with a skill that spreads damage around. Now, the developers here are at fault for their implementation of Frailty. It's their fault for not foreseeing how this implementation could be abused, but that doesn't mean it's okay to abuse the exploit. When you install Diablo 3, you accept the end-user license agreement, which, in Section C, subsection 2, states that Blizzard may revoke your license to use Battle.net and/or Diablo 3 if you engage in any form of cheating, including exploits. Now, you can argue that some people were using the exploit without realizing it. And to that I say, if you're doing a 140 level Greater Rift, a level of Greater Rift higher than has ever been achieved by the top players, and you're killing that Rift Guardian in one shot when it normally takes minutes to kill that Rift Guardian, then clearly something fishy is going on. If you use this exploit to do a level 90 Greater Rift, then you're not the kind of person that people are upset about over this. What it boils down to for me is the appearance of fair play. By doing such high Greater Rifts, people were able to level up their gems to a point higher than has ever been attained by the top players that spend hours every day grinding and grinding and grinding. And to clarify, I'm not one of those players. I'm not butthurt that people have higher level gems than me. I don't care that people got a bunch of free progress on their accounts. What I care about is the long-term impact of this exploit on the health of the game and its community. If the appearance of fair play is not maintained, people will be disincentivized to keep playing a game. Some people don't care if other people are cheating, but many do. And most people would rather play in a cheat-free environment than in an environment where some people are cheaters and some aren't. If the exploiters were allowed to keep their level 140 gems, then months from now, new players would come around, they would see those gem levels, and they would eventually realize that there's no way for them to ever reach that the only way that happened was due to an exploit. And then the perception of fair play is broken. It doesn't matter how good I ever get, I can't ever get that because he cheated to get that. By bringing the gem levels down to what is currently the highest possible achieved level, at least new players won't question things, and the appearance of fair play will be maintained going forward. But unfortunately, this still doesn't feel fair to a lot of players. Let's use an analogy here, inspired by something that community member Bagstone said. Let's say a bank just crumbled to the ground. The designers left in a huge design flaw that led to this incident, and now you just have all this money that's getting blown down the street. People are grabbing at it. Some of them know that this money came from the bank. Others just see money and they don't know where it came from. Eventually, the police issue a statement asking people to please stop grabbing the money, that it came from the bank, that it's not allowed to grab this money. But not everyone hears this statement, and some of them who do hear it don't care. So some people end up with a little bit of money, and others end up with hundreds of millions of dollars. The police then try to track down all the people that took money. And to figure out who are the people that took the money, what they decide to do is look at who the richest people in the town were before the bank broke down. And let's say they find that the richest people in the town had $10 million each. Then the police track down anyone in the town that has more than $10 million. But then, instead of taking back all the stolen money, the police just take back enough of the money to bring everyone back down to $10 million. No further punishment, and we're now left with a town in which we have a lot more people who have $10 million. Except, these other people didn't actually earn that $10 million. This is the exact situation we're in now in Diablo 3. All that people that saw that money but refused to take it on moral principle, or out of fear of going to jail, they're the real losers here. And maybe the next time that they see money up for grabs, they may just take it. And that's the real shame here. But what do you guys think? Do you guys still feel this wasn't an exploit? Do you think Blizzard didn't come down hard enough on the exploiters? Sound off in the comments. Now, the hotfix that patched out the exploit also brought a change to the Inarius Bonestorm build, something that amounts effectively to a nerf. Now, what's important to note though is that it was the build that was nerfed and not the set itself. Basically, there was a bugged interaction. The Mirror gem, the one that brings down the smites, was triggering way too often. And to be fair, it's just that the 6-piece bonus of the set was causing things to trigger more often than they should. So the rate of triggering was decreased. It now triggers roughly 1/3 as often as it previously did. So this results in a huge damage drop for that build. We're talking 5-10 Greater Rift levels, and it basically means that Mirror is just no longer an optimum gem for that build. You could still run Inarius, you could still run the Bonestorm, but you're not going to be doing it with the Mirror. You're going to go with another gem. Bane of the Powerful is a good choice. The gem of Efficacious Toxin has been used by some people, and we even see Stricken. But here's the thing, Traghouls was already emerging as the more powerful set once we got wind that Blizzard was going to nerf the Bonestorm build. And by the time the nerf went through, Traghouls was very clearly the superior set. So this led us to question, why nerf the Bonestorm build when it's not even the most powerful build? Well, because it wasn't an intentional nerf. It was the correction of a bug, and that bug was leading to the build's power. So then some people were asking why not just buff Mirror's damage in order to account for the lower trigger rate. Well, one thing to factor in is that the 3% health regen from the smite, that was also something that made the build good. So it just leaves us in a tricky situation. But what do you folks think? Should Blizzard have just left the build in to keep the Mirror build alive? Moving on to other news, we learned that the Rise of the Necromancer character pack was the second most downloaded DLC in June on the PS4, and it released June 27th. So that's pretty impressive. If it had released earlier in the month, it could have probably gotten the #1 spot. It was only defeated by Call of Duty, but it still managed to beat out DLC for Final Fantasy XIV, Injustice 2, Battlefield 1, and Minecraft. We have to remember that with more than 30 million sales, Diablo 3 is the 12th best-selling video game of all time. And I know a lot of people think, well, it's just purely from riding off the coattails of Diablo 2. Yes, that contributed to the success, but not entirely. Diablo 3 launched in May of 2012, and by the end of 2012, it only had 12 million copies sold. As of June 2015, we were up to 30 million sales, including Reaper of Souls and all the various console versions. By that point, people knew what they were buying. They had heard all of the issues, all of the this is not Diablo 2 blah blah blah, so a lot of that success was on its own merit. I'd be interested to learn what exactly the sales figures are for the Necromancer pack, because I think if it sells well enough, we likely will get another character pack, and the safe bet would be to say it's probably going to be some kind of shape-shifting spear-using class, maybe a mixture of the Druid and the Amazon. These are things that will be callbacks to Diablo 2 and that we don't have in Diablo 3. And our last bit of Diablo news, we're just going to give you a reminder that Season 11 starts next week on Thursday. That's July 20th, and it'll start at 5 p.m. PDT in North America, 5 p.m. CEST in Europe, and 5 p.m. KST in Asia. What class will you be playing in Season 11? Or rather, what Necromancer build will you be playing in Season 11? Alright, on to our Overwatch news. We're now a week into Doomfist's release on the test server, and he seems relatively balanced. He's really strong against some heroes, but really weak against others. He has counters. And more importantly, he looks like a hero that can really shake up the meta. Now this week on the test server, we finally got to take a look at his additional skins, which you can see over here. And what's really cool about him is that a lot of his skins, sprays, and voice lines are just littered with references to fighting games like Street Fighter and Tekken, and even the anime One Punch Man. And one thing worthy of note is that this skin here was previously called Cheetah, but then there was this post that blew up on Reddit in which someone very accurately pointed out that the print is actually not cheetah print, so Blizzard renamed it to the leopard skin. We also know from some data miners that for the Summer Games event coming up in August, Doomfist will be getting 4 cosmetics for the Summer Games event, which likely includes a skin and a spray or two. Now I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I'm not really crazy about Doomskin's skins. I really like his base skin the most. So I'm kinda hoping for something special to come with the Summer Games. But what do you think? Which of his skins is your favorite? Now, along with the Doomfist skins on the test server this week also came some balance changes. Zarya is getting a huge buff. People can no longer escape her ult, her graviton. Previously, there's roughly a dozen heroes that had powers that enabled them to zip out of that black hole. No more. No more escape. This will make her wombo combos with other people's ults even more devastating. Some good news for Reaper players, Reaper no longer shouts out when he's repositioning using his Shadow Step. It's a lot quieter now, the range is a lot shorter. And good news for McCree players, McCree's flashbang now highly reduces the momentum of an individual that is stunned. This means that if someone was in the middle of moving, they're not going to keep sliding and slide around that corner and out of view. But probably the best news is for Reinhardt players. He's getting so many fixes that make him feel good to play again. They fixed the hitbox on his Fire Strike. There's a lot of changes they made with the hammer swing that was causing issues with latency. His hammer swing speed has been increased by 10%. A lot of animation canceling bugs have been fixed, a lot of stuff that's related to high latency. The Fire Strike and the charge animations now sync correctly regardless of network latency, and charge now more reliably pins targets. So it's only fitting that Reinhardt finally gets all these changes to feel good again, right when his direct counter gets added to the game. Moving on, we got an enormous post from game director Jeff Kaplan on game balance. We'll highlight some of what he said here. Quote, "The most controversial thing I'll say here, hopefully, is that I believe the game is currently balanced. What I mean is that I don't feel like there are any heroes who are way too strong to the point of breaking balance. That doesn't mean that I personally don't think there are some problems with heroes. While I believe moving Roadhog away from a one-shot combo was a necessary thing we had to do, I'm not entirely satisfied with where he's at right now. Skipping ahead, statistically the things that are most unbalanced aren't what you think they are. Symmetra and Torbjorn win rates are not balanced. They are too good, but this is why we don't balance on statistics alone. I don't sense a great community uproar over the fact that Torb and Symmetra are overpowered right now, at least statistically." I'm gonna interject real quick here and say, oh, I hate Symmetra. I hate playing against Symmetra. I think she's absolutely OP, but that's just me. Jeff goes on to say, "The perception of balance is more powerful than balance itself." Now I'm going to pause right here to comment on that line. What's funny about this is that it ties into what I was saying earlier about the Diablo 3 exploit. The perception of fair play is more important than fair play itself. Our perception is ultimately more important than objective reality. Our perception forms our personal reality. For example, if we're led to believe that Hanzo is a garbage tier hero, if we always see the community tearing down Hanzo mains, if we always see people asking people to switch off Hanzo, then the actual balance numbers don't matter. Our perception, and thus our reality, is that Hanzo is trash, and we're likely to lose if we have a Hanzo on our team. Jeff goes on to say that, quote, I am getting the sense that the real issue people are feeling is that the meta does not shift as frequently as they would like. The meta that we refer to here, the metagame, is the popular team compositions and tactics among the pro players. Jeff says that, quote, the vast majority of us don't really play this meta at all, but we're aware of it either through community discussions or because we enjoy watching the pro scene. There are a lot of ways the meta can change, but if we had to boil it down to 3 main ways, that we see in video games at least, I would point to 1. Something changes with the balance, 2. Players innovate new strategies, 3. The game forces meta change through mechanics. Jeff went on to explain that he doesn't believe in making balance changes just to shift the meta. In other words, he believes in making balance changes if a hero is not balanced, not because a hero has a high or a low pick rate. He pointed out how some games, mostly MOBA games, have systems of picks and bans that force players to play a wider range of heroes because the enemy team can block you from taking a certain hero. This prevents every game from boiling down to the same compositions over and over. But Jeff does not believe that this type of system would be a good fit for Overwatch. He believes that the best case scenario is when the meta changes through the players finding new tactics, which has happened throughout Overwatch's lifetime, but perhaps not at a fast enough rate for the community to be content with. And that's where Jeff basically points out, so what? You guys don't play the meta anyway. And this is where perception versus reality kicks in. The Overwatch team has all the statistics, and Jeff points out that the vast majority of players do not play meta compositions anyway, even in competitive. And that's really all you can do when someone's perception doesn't line up with reality. You can try to break that perception in order for them to accept a new reality. Unfortunately, it's often difficult to get that message across an entire community. Changing just one person's mind is tricky enough. But when a whole group holds onto an idea, that idea is strengthened through self-reinforcement. Now, I'm doing Jeff a disservice here by summarizing this post, so I encourage you to go read it in full if you're interested and feel strongly about the matter. I'll have the link in the description below. But my question to you guys is, does the meta matter to you? Do you feel the meta needs to change frequently to prevent the game from going stale? Moving on, in a separate post, Jeff revealed the map win rates on attack and defense. And surprisingly, things are really well balanced. Most maps have a difference of under 2%, some even less than 1%, between the attack and defense win rate. The only exceptions were Eichenwald, which favors defenders with a 53.87% win rate, and Horizon, which favors attackers with a 54.5% win rate. It should be noted that these stats are from Quick Play, but even the worst balanced maps still have pretty even win rates. Now my question to you is, does this match up with your perception? Or do you feel there are certain maps that it's definitely easier or more difficult to attack or defend on? Now the last thing I'll talk about here is just a crazy, silly, fun game mode with Doomfist. You've been seeing this gameplay happen in the background. It's basically Doomfist with no cooldowns. Some people in the community have called this Super Saiyan mode, but it's just really fun to play Doomfist with no cooldowns and basically fly through the air with the uppercut and literally punch Pharahs out of the air. It is so satisfying. Get some friends together, go try this out for yourself. It's some of the most fun that I've had playing Overwatch in a very long time. And that wraps up this video. Remember to leave a comment with your thoughts on the stories we covered this week. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Overwatch and Diablo content.